English translation, 707th contact. Part 2. Saturday, the 28th of April, 2018, 13:19 hours.
Thanks. In order to explain the whole thing, it must first of all be made clear that in explanations, everything can never be explained as precisely as the entire facts of a matter actually require. Consequently, only just the facts that arise can be explained as well as possible, but never completely, but only just directly in relation to an arising process. This unfortunately leads to the fact that not infrequently ambiguities arise, which again and again lead to further questions that require new explanations. In addition, it is inevitable that explanations of the same topics are always presented in a different way and with different terms, etc., resulting in erroneous or apparent misunderstandings due to a lack of understanding on the part of the questioners, readers, and listeners, which then have to be laboriously cleared up. Therefore, by what I am about to explain, it should also be pointed out another time that the term creation or creation universal consciousness effectively means that which is the total existence of that which corresponds to infinity. Boundlessness, immeasurability, or the totality of the entire far-reaching creative universal consciousness. Spirit energy, endless existence, or creation, universal consciousness. The form of creation, as we earthlings and also the Playarin exist in it, is the lowest form of creation at all, and has as the only form of creation a material belt in which galaxies, nebulae and solar systems, planets and life forms, etc. exist, while already higher developed forms of creation are only of a purely spirit energy nature and develop higher and higher in order to integrate after 1049 transformations into higher and higher forms of creation and levels of evolution into the first of 7 absolute forms, into the absolute absolutum. To explain what is meant by the term creation or creation universal consciousness, the following can serve as a parable. Imaginatively, the concept of creation or creation universal consciousness can be thought of as an egg-like structure of gigantic, for human understanding, immeasurable size, which exists alongside a countless mass of other forms of creation of different states of evolution as a pure form of spirit energy in the super-ultra-infinity limitlessness, immeasurability, infinite spatiality of the so-called nothing infinity. At the Big Bang, that is to say at the emergence, that is to say at the becoming of creation, that is to say creation universal consciousness, the creation structure emerged as 7 basic levels, namely in the form of 7 expanding spirit energy belts, whereby the 4th belt manifested materially through the interaction of the 3rd and 5th belt. Consequently, therefore, the material belt emerged, in which flakes, nebulae, and finally galaxies, suns, planets, and life, etc. were formed. Each material belt is the only one of its kind in each dimension or space-time structure, also called the universe of the entire creation of universal consciousness, and each one is also expanding at an enormous speed, as are the 6 other belts/planes, which are, however, each of a purely spiritual energy nature. This pure spirit energy of the 6 other belts levels corresponds to the creative primordial substance out of ex nihilo, out of nothing, from which the first form of creation or creation out of nothing, creatio ex nihilo equals sign created out of nothing, has emerged, through which a becoming of an existence can be generated in the first place, be it in relation to matter of any forms, or a life form with regard to life forms of all genera and species. The material belt as the only one of its kind in the 7 dimensions or space-time structures or universes of the creation of universal consciousness does not correspond to its own dimension or space-time structure or universe, but only the entire expanse of all 7 belts in the interior of the creation of universal consciousness together form this, and thus what is called universe, dimension, and space-time structure. Mistakenly and in complete ignorance of the effective facts concerning the structure and existence of creation universal consciousness, the human beings of Earth call the material belt the universe. The error, however, is that a material belt is only the 7th part of the total width of all 7 belts of each dimension or space-time structure within creation universal consciousness. Consequently, only all 7 belts levels together can be called the universe or dimension and space-time structure. So it must be clear that the material belt alone does not correspond to the whole vastness of the universe, but can only be seen and judged as what it really is. Namely only the seventh part of the dimension universe, that is to say of the Durn universe, that is to say Durn space-time structure, as it is called by the Playarin. Absolutely simultaneously with the coming into being or becoming of the creation of universal consciousness, 7 different dimensions or space-time structures arose in it. Consequently, all space-time structures or dimensions are in exactly the same space as all the others, but separated from each other as a different dimension. All dimensions are also provided with a material belt, in which galaxies, nebulae, celestial bodies and planets, etc., are arranged differently in each space-time structure. There is the possibility for intelligent life forms to develop techniques through their high evolution and intelligence and to penetrate the dimensions or space-time structures in a technical way, or to change from their dimension into other dimensions and thus to travel back and forth between them. As an example, creation can be thought of as an inflatable balloon in which there are 7 other inflated balloons of exactly the same size, whereby these 7 inner balloons can be understood as 7 dimensions. The outermost balloon envelope, which represents creation or creation universal consciousness in a similar way, continues to be inflated and consequently expands further and further. As happens in the same way in its interior with the 7 further balloons, consequently these always inevitably remain the same size as the outer balloon envelope. These 7 inner balloons, which can be understood as 7 dimensions, thus expand equally with the outer envelope and correspond to the same outer conditions of the outer balloon envelope, which has 7 rings, which can be understood as 7 planes, whereby the 4th ring is covered with dust and can be thought of as a material belt. Creation can be thought of as an example of an egg-like spiritual energy shell, which floats in the boundless and timeless super-ultra-infinity immeasurability, infinite spaciousness of the absolute nothingness, along with countless other creations of the same or, according to the state of evolution, differently higher kind. This creation structure thus contains within itself 7 different spirit energy belts, levels, or 7 different dimensions or space-time structures simile. Balloons, which all arose simultaneously at the Big Bang, but are absolutely independent of each other. As a result of their simultaneous formation, they all have the same age, the same time and the same time streams, etc., but completely different galaxies, solar and planetary systems, etc., whereby these dimensions or space-time structures correspond to what the human beings of Earth call the universe or cosmos or world space, as well as space, cosmic space, universe, or philosophically mundus. With these terms, especially universe, cosmos, the human beings of Earth erroneously call only that which is visible or tangible to them. Precisely that which presents itself as a material belt, with all the material things existing in it, the galaxies, supergalaxies and hypergalaxies, solar and planetary systems, and so on. However, this does not embody creation or creation universal consciousness simile, outer balloon shell, but only one of its 7 dimensions or one of its 7 space-time structures, and the only material belt contained therein, which exist in their 7 differently dimensioned spirit belts levels. Altogether, all 7 dimensions or 7 space-time structures are given in the extension of the entire creation. Consequently, they are also spread over the 7 basic belts planes of creation, and are thus in their size and width absolutely in the same measure as the actual creation structure. The dimension or the space-time structure in which the Sol system and the Earth float and in which Earth humans exist is called Durn space-time structure by the Playarin, or Durn universe according to the Earth human sense and understanding. If living beings of any kind or species exist on any world in the material belt, then these naturally develop in various ways, whereby many factors play a part, such as instinct, etc. in the case of lower kinds and species, and intelligence, intellect, reason, and logic, etc. in the case of higher life forms, whereby the periods of time with regard to the duration of evolution, etc., are also of enormous importance. So, for example, on a life-bearing planet in a solar system of a space-time structure or dimension, living beings can be more or less evolved than on another planet in the same space-time structure, or in another dimension of the same creation. such as for example in the Ankar space-time structure or in the Ankar dimension in which the Playarin exist, or on other worlds in a space-time structure of a completely different creation. The Durn universe, that is to say the Durn dimension, that is to say the Durn space-time structure, is one of the 7 space-time structures given in the creation of universal consciousness, that is to say one of the 7 dimensions in which the galaxy exists, which is called Milky Way by the Earthlings, and in which the SOL system floats in a spiral arm, in which again the Earth is arranged. The Playarin come into this dimension, that is to say into this Durn universe, that is to say space-time structure through a technically created dimension gate, which has already existed for about 30 million years, from their Ankar space-time structure, that is to say from their Ankar dimension, into the Durn space-time structure, and thus also to Earth. The Playarin exist in their Ankar space-time structure at a distance of about 500 light-years from Earth, whereby the Playarin in their Ankar dimension, seen from the Durn material belt, that is to say seen from the Durn universe, come from a distance of about 115 light-years. 1 light-year equals 9.461 trillion kilometers. That is to say 9.461 1012 kilometers, further beyond the Pleiades stars known and visible on Earth from the Ankar space-time structure. The distance from Earth to the Pleiades stars in the Durn universe is around or an average of 400 light-years.
Explanation: Pleiades, noted from Wikipedia. The Pleiades are an open star cluster in the constellation Taurus. Age approximate 100 million years. History: discovered to prehistoric discovery period. Catalog names: M45 EC0344 plus 239 OCL 421 MEL 22 CR 42 H0346 plus 24 Aladdin Previewer. The Pleiades also have names like Atlantides, Atlantiades, Pleiades, Dove, Seven Sisters, Black Hen. The Pleiades can be seen from Earth as an open star cluster with the naked eye. In the Messier catalog it has the designation M45. They are part of our galaxy, the Milky Way. Since the Pleiades were known as an asterism long before the invention of the telescope, traditionally only the brightest main stars were often referred to as Pleiades. In some ancient cultures and historical accounts, only 6 stars were counted as Pleiades. The reason for this was the star Playarin, which is a variable star. Its apparent brightness fluctuates slowly but irregularly between that of Teigita and Seleno, so that Playarin can sometimes only be seen when the star Seleno can also be observed. 6 to 9 stars are visible to the naked eye depending on the viewing conditions. The arc of sight is 14.5 degrees to 15.5 degrees in clear skies and 19.5 degrees to 20.5 degrees in cloudy weather. The heliacal rising is observable in good visibility conditions from a horizon altitude of 6 degrees to 7 degrees. The Sun is about 9 degrees below the horizon at this time. The Pleiades are visible in the northern sky from about the beginning of July until the end of April. The cluster is about 140 parsecs away in the constellation Taurus, contains at least 1,200 stars and is about 125 million years old. The NGC catalog does not list the Pleiades, but there are several reflection nebulae in the Pleiades area with their own NGC numbers. These include the Maya Nebula NGC 1432 and the Merope Nebula NGC 1435. Only about half a minute of arc, or 0.06 light-years from Merope, is a concentration of interstellar dust known as AC349 or Barnard's Merope Nebula, which is kinematically independent of the Pleiades.
The Playarin as very distant descendants of their very early ancestors from the lineage of the Primordial, prophet primordial annunciator Nocodemian therefore come from the Ankar dimension into the Durn universe, that is to say into the Durn dimension or just into the Durn space-time structure, and thus also to Earth. This is because a large number of their early ancestors settled on the Earth planet millions of years ago, and then also died there, whereby their spirit forms are still reborn on the Earth world over many reincarnations and animate human beings, whose development the Playarin strive for. Earth was and is the only planet in the Durn space-time structure, that is to say in the Durn universe, that is to say in the Durn dimension, where the Playarin have an observing and helpful teaching effect, because all other planets and areas that were settled by the Playarin and the most distant descendants from the line of the original prophet, that is to say original herald Nocodemion, are all in the Ankar universe, that is to say in the Ankar space-time structure, that is to say in the Ankar dimension. Therefore, when in conversations there was talk of Playarin immigrants settling, for example, on the planet Nissan in the Lyra systems, on Sirius planets or Centauri planets, or beyond the Sun Milky Way, on a planet called Kudra in a solar system called the Nisan system, this did not and does not refer to the Durn universe, but always to the Ankar dimension. The names of the constellation systems, which were and are named in the Durn space-time structure, only designate approximately the positions and distances, seen from Earth, to the stars and planets in the Ankar universe respectively, the Ankar dimension, where the distant descendants of the Playarin have settled. So it must be clear that in the entire Durn universe, or in the Durn space-time structure, where the Milky Way galaxy, the SOL system and the Earth with the Earth humans exist, the Playarin come and go and are active only in the SOL system and on the planet Earth, but nowhere else in the entire Durn universe. When the Playarin change dimensions or space-time structures or switch back and forth between them, then this happens on the one hand between their Ankar universe or Ankar dimension and the Durn universe or Durn dimension, or between other universe dimensions in the structure of creation universal consciousness. On the other hand, the Playarin also change into other dimensions when they travel in their Ankar universe or in the Durn universe, for example on Earth, into the dimensions of the past or future. This also makes it clear that, on the one hand, changes of dimensions or space-time structures are possible, which means that it is possible to change from one dimension of the creation of universal consciousness into another, or from one space-time structure into another, whereby 7 different dimensions or space-time structures are given by the creation of universal consciousness alone, in which it is possible to change back and forth, or to change from one universe into another. In addition to this possibility, the dimensions of the past and the future are also given, into which it is possible to travel or change from the present, which lasts 2.7 seconds, into the past or future, just as it is also possible to change from the future into the past and from the past into the future. It is also worth mentioning that it is absolutely impossible to change something for the better or worse or negative or positive in a dimension of the past when something has already happened up to the time of the present from which the change is made into the past. Changes can only be made in the current time of 2.7 seconds of the present, which then as causes determine the course of events up to the resulting effect, and thus follow the law of causality and fulfill it infallibly. A further possibility with regard to a change of dimensions or universe or space-time structure is that, if the technical possibilities are given, universal consciousness can penetrate into another creation of the same direction as universal consciousness and change back and forth in its own dimensions or space-time structure. Just as in such other creations of the same direction, universal consciousness, the possibility of changing into the past and future exists. As a definition of the nothing, that is to say the nothing vacuum, the absolute nothing space, out of which the being absolutum is self-regenerating and self-creating as creation out of nothing, that is to say creation out of nothing, creatio ex nihilo, it is to be understood that it is a spatial boundlessness of endless, timeless duration in which nothing materially existing and thus also being does not exist, for the whole is to be understood in a material way as an absolute nothing space. The whole must be understood as an infinitely timeless spirit energy swinging duration, as existing hyper-super-ultra-fine spirit energy swinging waves and absolute non-material high spirit energy existence. The terms absolute nothing, nothing vacuum, and absolute nothing space, etc., therefore mean that in this infinitely timeless, spirit energetically endless duration, no materially existing matter and consequently also no being exists, and also absolutely nothing is generated. This means that there is no being, and also absolutely nothing can be generated, neither in any solid, liquid, visible, audible, nor in any gaseous, measurable, tangible, or otherwise perceptible form or manner. As a definition of the non-existence form nothing, that is to say of the nothing vacuum, the absolute nothing space, only a matter-free nihilo, that is to say nothing, can be understood in any conceivable form. Consequently, it is to be understood in this way that absolutely no material existence existed in a nothing that could have been given as the origin of all being. And if it is now taught that all existence arose from the absolute nothing, or the nothing vacuum, the nihilo, then this is based, according to the first spirit energy level, Arahat Atharsata teaching, on the fact that no form of any matter was present, not even in the most minimal form. The primordial emergence of the state from the infinite duration of the nihilo, or nothing, was founded in a self-exciting spirit energy vibrationally emerged Googleplex please tiny 10 many giganumbers equal sign unimaginably large number spirit energy impulse of neutral form, which condensed and developed humanly inexplicable in the material-less absolute nothing of a space-time-less permanence. According to the Patali teaching, it was a matter of the development of spirit energy physics, that in every non-material non-state of an absolute nothing, Googleplex plasmolist spirit energy swinging waves manifest, as this is also the case with all forms of material and gaseous substances. This is because absolutely all matter emits swinging waves, as this is also inherent in every form of spirit energy, even if it is infinitely tinier than a Yocto Googleplex Pleswinzigkeit. Therefore, it was only through a Yocto Googleplex Pleswinzig spirit energy iota swinging in the nihilo, that is to say nothing, that is to say thus, the origin of all actual spirit energy existence was set by a Yocto Googleplex Plesjota negative, positive hyper-super-ultra-subatomic spirit energy vibration in the nothing space of the nothing. Because a Yocto Googleplex Plesjota negative positive hyper-super-ultra-subatomic spirit energy vibration condensed and developed into an impulse, from which a chain reaction arose, whereby the nothing, however, remained in itself as such in a non-material state. Continuing to exist in non-material, spatially and timelessly infinite duration, the materialless spirit energy vibration continued to unfold, self-excitingly vibrationally energetically, and became a hyper-super-ultra-subatomic spirit energy factor neutral state, and continued to condense in the endless and timeless duration of the non-existence of the nihilo. In further self-exciting manner, the spirit energy factor formed itself as two-pole positive-negative energy, from which another and higher vibrational energy factor evolved, which generated as negative positive spirit being energy and formed itself into the seen absolutum. The hyper-super-ultra-fine spirit energy vibration thus condensed and formed itself in the nothing vacuum, that is to say in the absolute nothing space in purely vibrationally immaterial form, which is why we speak of a relative perfect absolute nothing, that is to say nothing vacuum. In this way, in endless, timeless duration, the spirit energy arose out of itself, in a self-exciting way as the tiniest, vibrating hyper-super-ultra-fine spirit energy Googleplex plus finest form, which as such is neither detectable nor measurable for the human beings of Earth with all technical and conceivably measurable means, at least not yet in present time, as also not yet in 100 years. From the beginning of the condensation of the tiny spirit energy vibration, which has existed since endless, timeless duration, a time duration arose according to the Patali level, which was summarized by the universal founder Nokodemian in the term Zaitanon. According to the Patali explanations, a time canon comprises a period of time in years that can no longer be mathematically calculated in earthly terms. after the becoming of the compression of the spirit energy swinging waves in the nothing vacuum, and the duration of time that arose with it. A further compression took place during 3-time nanos, namely up to the ever very first and at the same time very last nothing vacuum Big Bang, which led to the very first and last self-exciting creation and existence of the sign absolutum, which created the 6 further absolutum forms. Absolutum forms, that is to say absolutum levels from highest to lowest: 1, being absolutum; 2, sohar absolutum; 3, super absolutum; 4, creation absolutum; 5, central absolutum; 6, primal absolutum; 7, absolute absolutum. Equal sign from this emerged the first 49 simple creations. Forms of creation, universal consciousness, having as lowest 7 belts levels, of which the 4th is the matter belt. In each creation of universal consciousness, there are also 7 dimensions or space-time structures, which are also called universes, whereby, however, earthly mankind, mistakenly and in ignorance of the effectiveness, estimates only the matter belt with all its galaxies, nebulae, comets, meteors, suns, planets and moons, etc. as the visible universe. Thus, a threefold time-anon process took place, whereby the first started from the vacuum of nothingness, resulting in the following. With regard to the first spirit energy vibration impulse, which is absolutely self-exciting and self-creating as sein absolutum, as creation out of nothingness, that is to say, creation out of nothing, creatio ex nihilo, it is to be understood that it is a matter of an unspatial boundlessness of endless, timeless duration, in which nothing materially existing and thus also being does not exist. The terms absolute nothing, nothing vacuum, and absolute nothing space, etc., thus mean that in this endless infinity, endless duration and endless timelessness, no substantial element and thus no material being basic substance and no being was given or existed, neither in any visible, audible, nor in any possible measurable, nor tangible or otherwise perceptible or otherwise ascertainable form or manner. The absolute nothing space thus formed itself from a spirit energy vibrationally originated Jotahi Google Plex plus Winzig, hyper super ultra subatomar state in endless, timeless duration into an indirect generating creation factor. And this happened vibrationally, energetically out of the spirit energy vibration that developed out of itself in the nothingness, that is to say absolute nothing, that is to say nothing vacuum, which in the course of its existence specifically generated a two-pole, that is to say negative positive energy and power, through a spirit vibrational energetic act of a self-exciting self-fertilization. From this, through a self-exciting further purely vibrational spirit energy condensation, a negative positive energy vibration took place, which became a boundless, spatio-temporal and unstoppable absolute nothing space state, because the spirit energy vibration expanded in nothingness and thus practically became its own nothing space. This resulted in a nothing vacuum compression through a spirit energy compression, from which the sign absolutum ultimately emerged, while the absolute nothing, the nihilo in the form of the absolute, endless, timeless duration continued to exist as a unique birthing factor after the creation of the sein absolutum, and continues to exist inexorably in all infinity as endless nothing for all infinite duration. In repetition, the primordial emergence of the state of endless, timeless duration of spirit energy vibration was founded in a self-exciting, self-generating spirit energy vibrationally emerged impulse of neutral form, which emerged from an absolute of a space-timeless permanence and developed into a Google Plex plus Yoda tiny negative positive hyper super ultra subatomic spirit energy block. This self-excitingly continued to form itself vibrationally energetically and became a hyper super ultra subatomic spirit energy factor of neutral state of endless duration. In a further self-exciting manner, this further formed itself as a two-pole energy into a positive and negative force, from which another vibrational energetic factor developed, which developed as a negative positive spirit sein energy, from which the being absolute developed out of nothingness. This also means that the nihilo, that is to say the nothing, that is to say the nothing space, was leg holder, that is to say carrier of the spirit energy vibration, but absolutely free of any Google Plex plus Jota-like matter, however slight. Consequently, There actually existed a nihilo, an effective nothing, because the pure spirit energy and its oscillation was none, and therefore not even the finest form of matter, and not even an aura, but only vibration. Consequently, the nothing in itself was absolutely insubstantial, and factually therefore in itself, and in itself nothing, is nothing, and will also never be anything other than nothing. The term being refers exclusively to all existence of all coarse, semi-coarse and gaseous matter, as well as to measurable swinging waves in the material realm and thus to everything material. As this also corresponds to the life of every life form, be it the human being, the plants, the animals, the creatures, etc., and all genera and species of everything existing. This, while the term being has its correctness purely only for the energy of spirit and creation, consequently being has nothing to do with being or with purely material or physical existence. Only in this sense, according to the spiritual teaching of Nocedemian, must the two terms being and being be understood. So when the spiritual teaching speaks of a non-being, and thus also of a nothing in or of being, then this refers solely to the non-existence of material being, or of gross matter of any kind. Contrary to this is the creation spirit energy being, the spirit energy, that is to say the creation energy, which developed in the endlessness of the nothing, that is to say in the nothing vacuum, that is to say absolute no space endless duration, in the tiniest being ultra subatomic form out of itself, self-exciting in two-pole, that is to say negative positive form. Thereby, this first googolplex plasmolus spirit energy iota became the origin of all actual permanent ultra being ultra energy and permanent ultra being ultra power, out of which the first absolute form, the original ultra being absolute, developed in a unique way, in a self-exciting way. And from this, in further consequence, emerged all the other 6 absolute forms created only once on a gigantic scale. Precisely the Sohar absolutum, super absolutum, creation absolutum, central absolutum, absolutum, and absolute absolutum. All absolutum creations, that is to say absolutum universes, that is to say absolutum forms, that is to say absolutum planes, were created only once by the permanent scene/beinger energy and permanent scene/beinger power of the sign absolutum, while this itself emerged in a self-exciting way from the nothing vacuum by the very first Big Bang. The absolutum forms 1 to 6 do not create any further universes, that is to say creations, that is to say creation universes, that is to say creations of universal consciousness since their primordial beginning, that is to say since their primordial existence. Of all the 7 absolutum forms, only the absolute absolutum as the last, 7th and lowest absolutum form creates further creation forms. And only the simplest and lowest creation form, or the lowest universe form that has a gross coarse material universe belt, that is to say the form of creation universal consciousness. In this way, the absolute absolutum, in addition to the original creation, which emerges as the next higher form of creation from the higher evolving creation of universal consciousness, constantly creates new simple or low universes of creation, which can range from 1 to 49 multilingual universes, but which on the one hand have a material belt or a visible universe, and on the other hand 7 dimensions or space-time structures. These lower forms of creation evolve up to the form of original creations that also create universes, and then to the central creation, after which a further development takes place up to the highest level of the universe of creation, which ends as the 1049, after which a fusion of the universes of creation with the absolute absolutum takes place. The lowest universe, that is to say the lowest creation form, is for example the Durn universe of the Milky Way with the Sol system as well as the Earth, where earthly mankind exists, whereby the Durn universe form in the creation of universal consciousness is not the only dimension in it, because the creation in itself comprises 7 dimensions, that is to say space-time structure with 7 belts levels, of which one is the matter belt and also has dark matter. And in this material belt, gases, electrons, and all 280 elements manifest and generate, which exist collectively and from which galaxies, nebulae, suns, black holes, matter clouds, neutrino clouds, etc., as well as planets, moons, comets, meteors, and ultimately, the tiniest and largest life forms develop. And if, in the course of time, the lowest creations of universal consciousness change into primordial creations or primordial universes, then these create one or more 1 to 49 new lowest creations of universal consciousness, which develop themselves out of their own impulses through spirit energy vibrational impulses, which are called primordial ideas. The next following form of creation in the expansion through evolution out of the lowest form of creation, then, no longer has 7 dimensions, that is to say no space-time structure, and also no coarse material belt plane with galaxies, celestial bodies and planets, as well as coarse material life forms, because already the next stage of evolution is only purely spirit energy form. And what is still to be explained with regard to the original idea or idea, it is not a question of an actual idea, but solely of vibratory impulses capable of creation, as described in the title, The Idea of Creation, Creation Idea, Ideas of Human Beings. This is all that I had to say and explain once, and to which I ask what you have to say to my monologue.
A long speech and good explanations of the facts, to which much more could be said, but the whole thing would fill books, so your explanations are quite sufficient when they are done.
Thanks.